The Star Whisper station always hummed like something alive, metal ribs groaning softly, coolant lines sighing in steady pulses, the distant thrum of reactors resonating through the floor. To most humans, it sounded like machinery. To Liraen Vey, it sounded like exile. Elias Cade had been working the midnight shift when she arrived. He saw her reflected first, pale, silver-violet markings flickering across the navigation glass like moving constellations. He blinked, turned, and nearly dropped the scanner he was holding. A woman, tall, elegant, and unmistakably alien, stood in the entrance of Cargo Bay 7. Aorians were rare in human space. Their luminescent patterns reacted to emotion, their skin seemed sculpted from woven moonlight, and their presence typically made the air feel strangely still. Liraen was no exception. She carried herself like a diplomat or a priestess, or someone constantly one breath away from shattering. "Human," she said softly. Her voice held the calm of someone reciting protocol to keep from feeling anything. "Your vessel is in need of a navigation recalibration. I have been assigned temporary oversight." Right, that must have included surprising cargo techs until their hearts hiked several beats. Elias cleared his throat. "You're the Aorian specialist command promised." Yes, her gaze drifted across the cargo manifests behind him. "You are Elias Cade, second shift load coordinator." She said it like she'd memorized the entire crew roster before stepping aboard. Yes, that's me." He expected her to move on, but she didn't. Instead, her markings brightened, very faintly, from cool violet to a muted teal. She was studying him, not just glancing, studying. "You look at me often," she murmured. Elias froze. I what?" Liraen tilted her head, the movement precise, almost mechanical. "Since my arrival, your eyes return to me at measured intervals. 3 minutes, 26 seconds on average." 3 minutes? He nearly choked. That was not subtle, that was catastrophic. I didn't mean I wasn't staring." "You were." Her tone wasn't accusatory, it was observational, confused. "I am asking why." Her markings shifted, darkening toward indigo. He didn't know Aorian color language, but he'd learned enough from briefing packets to recognize that darker colors meant emotional encroachment. Possibly distrust, possibly defensiveness. She thought he was watching her because she unnerved him. He swallowed hard. "It's not because I'm uncomfortable. Most species find Aorians disquieting," she said softly. "Your crew avoids my presence. Their posture changes when I enter a room. Their eyes track my movements, their breathing shifts. A pause, yours shifts the most." "Because he stopped, then abandoned caution. Honesty was the only path out of this swamp. Because you're beautiful." Her markings froze mid-shift. Then they lit, not brightly, nothing dramatic, more like a slow sunrise beneath her skin, violets melting into rose gold. Pale silver pooling along her collarbone like spilled starlight. She stared at him as if he'd just triggered an alarm she didn't know she carried. "Beautiful," she repeated quietly. "Yes. Not unsettling, not unfamiliar." Her voice was breathless, threaded with disbelief. "Beautiful. Very." She blinked once, twice, slowly, like a system rebooting. Then she stepped closer. Not enough to violate personal space, but close enough that Elias could see the subtle shimmer of her patterns reacting. "No one has called me that," she whispered. "Aorian markings reveal too much. They are considered unbecoming, excess. Your markings are the most fascinating thing I've ever seen." Her breath hitched just slightly, but her markings flared again, the rose gold deepening into warm, living light. He realized then she wasn't just unused to compliments. She was unused to being seen. "Your attention," she hesitated, searching for vocabulary. "It is not unwelcome, only unfamiliar." "Oh," Elias breathed. "Okay, that's good. But it creates variables I did not plan for." Her fingers curled slightly at her side. "We Aorians do not express attraction directly. We request intermediaries. We initiate signaling rituals. You," her markings flared again, "are extremely direct." "Sorry, do not apologize." The warmth in her voice surprised him. "I find it clarifying." There was a silence then, soft, weightless. The kind that made the thrum of the station fade until only 2 people existed in the room. She inhaled slowly, her markings shifting to a gentle amber glow. "I must return to navigation," she said, "but we are not finished with this conversation." "We are." Her gaze. The next 12 hours were an exercise in tactical not looking. Elias failed spectacularly. He saw her in the mess, sitting alone at the end of a table, fingers wrapped around a mug she didn't drink from. Her markings flickered in slow patterns while she studied the room as if mapping social trajectories. He lasted maybe 40 seconds before his gaze drifted toward her. Her eyes lifted, met his. He looked away so fast his neck protested. In the corridor outside engineering, he heard her voice before he saw her, calm, precise, answering one of Chief Herrera's questions about jump vectors. The chief nodded like a man pretending he understood quantum drift math. When Elias rounded the corner, Liraen glanced at him through the transparent panel. Her markings warmed. He pretended to study a maintenance schedule that wasn't his. By the time his shift ended, his social battery and his dignity were both critically low. He just started toward his bunk when his wristcom chimed. Cade, he answered automatically. Cargo 7, said Liraen's voice, soft and even through the channel. 7 minutes. The line went dead. He stared at the comm. Okay, he whispered to himself. Sure, that's fine, totally normal. 7 minutes later, he stepped into Cargo Bay 7 again, suddenly very aware of every scuff on his boots and every heartbeat in his chest. She was already there, not standing this time. Sitting cross-legged atop a crate near the aft wall, surrounded by faintly glowing hollow projections. Starfields, gravity wells, potential jump corridors, all orbiting her like a slow galaxy. Her markings echoed the maps, soft blues and silver threads. Elias, she said, his name wrapped in the cadence of someone who almost never used first names. You came. You sounded like I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. Her gaze swept over him, assessing, but not cold. Free will is one of the more dangerous human traits. Dangerous, huh? You confess attraction to someone you barely know in an active cargo bay, she said simply. Then admit you find their most criticized features fascinating. This is not cautious behavior. He winced. When you say it like that, I sound reckless. You sound honest. The words landed heavier than he expected. She gestured to a crate opposite her. Sit. He obeyed, mostly because his legs might have given way anyway. A silence stretched between them, filled with the soft hum of the station and the whispering spin of the holomaps. Liraen finally broke it. Alien culture, she began, teaches us 3 primary disciplines: restraint, precision, and concealment. Our markings fracture all 3. She traced one of the holographic spirals absent-mindedly. Her own markings mirrored the motion, pulsing faintly. We cannot hide how we feel, she continued. Not fully. Our skin betrays us, so the solution is constant control, to feel nothing excessively. To never display more than a ripple when a storm lives beneath. That sounds exhausting, Elias said quietly. It is. Her markings deepened to duskier shades. I attempted to be exemplary, she went on. Perfect composure. Perfect control, I failed. A tiny shrug, often. So you left. Yes, her eyes stayed on the swirling star map. Among other species, the markings are curiosity, oddity, something to be studied or politely ignored. At least they are not a constant metric of failure. Elias swallowed, and then I started staring. And then you started staring, she agreed. Initially, I assumed discomfort. I have encountered it before. But your gaze did not carry the tension of fear. It was softer, intrigued. Her markings warmed just a little. It disrupted my assumptions. Disrupted in a good way, he asked, or the I should avoid this man forever way. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, but something that wanted to be. I summoned you here, did I not? Fair point. Her gaze met his fully then, steady and disconcertingly open. I need to understand something, Elias Cade, she said. When you say beautiful, what do you mean? He blinked. I mean beautiful, lovely, stunning, beautiful. In Aryan court speech, she said, there are 12 distinct terms for forms of aesthetic appreciation: symmetry, grace, radiant patterning, harmonic proportion. None of them are applied to markings like mine. They are reserved for neutral surfaces, architecture, ceremonial garments, controlled light patterns. Living emotional markings are considered messy. Well, Elias said slowly, humans are incredibly messy. Maybe that's why I like them. Be specific. There was no impatience in her tone, only intense curiosity. What precisely do you perceive when you look at me? No one had ever asked him that, not like this. Not with the expectation that he would answer in full. He took a breath. I see someone who moves like she's measuring the world, he began. Careful and precise, but not fragile. Like there's a lot of strength you don't show unless you have to. Her markings flickered, soft gold at the edges. I see patterns that don't stay one color because you don't stay one feeling. I see someone who feels more than she's been allowed to admit. And your markings. He smiled, small and helpless. "They're like visible honesty," he said. "You show what we all hide. That isn't ugly to me. That's brave, beautiful." The silence that followed felt fragile in a different way, like glass still cooling from the furnace. Her markings erupted. Not violently, not chaotic, just full. Golds and ambers and gentle rose spiraling out from her throat down her wrists across the sharp line of her cheekbones. She looked like someone had poured sunrise into her veins. "That," she whispered, eyes wide, "should not feel as relieving as it does." "Relieving? The constant effort to be tolerable," she said. "To not be too much, too bright, too obvious. It is wearying. Your perception offers a different framework." "Is that good?" She inhaled slowly, exhaled even slower. "It is dangerous," she decided, "because I want more of it." His heart threw itself against his ribs. "You do?" "Yes." Her gaze turned sharp again, considering. "Which leads us to the core variable in this equation. Me being human." "Yes," she said simply. "Your biology, your customs, your impulsive honesty. Cross-species attachments are not unknown, but they are complex, particularly when one party glows every time she experiences heightened emotion." "For the record," Elias said, "you glowing is not a deal-breaker." "For the record," Liraen replied, "that is precisely the kind of statement that makes me glow more." They both glanced involuntarily at the markings blooming along her forearms. He chuckled softly. "I'll try to keep my appreciation to a manageable level." "Do not," she said unexpectedly. He blinked. "Don't. If you begin filtering your responses," she said, "I will not know which version of your perception is real. I would rather be overwhelmed by sincerity than comforted by performance." That might have been one of the most alienly romantic things anyone had ever said to him. "So what do we do?" he asked. "About this." Her gaze dropped to her hands. For the first time, he saw hesitation, not from fear, but from unfamiliarity. "I do not know," she admitted. "I have no ritual to follow, no intermediary to consult. My training is useless here." "Same," he said. "No one covered what to do when gorgeous star-map priestess from a luminous culture likes you back at orientation." Her mouth twitched, definitely almost a smile this time. "Then perhaps," she said slowly, "we proceed as navigators do when charts end." "Which is?" Carefully, she replied, "with constant communication and a willingness to adjust trajectory." "That," Elias said, "I can work with." Her eyes met his again. There was a question in them now, not verbal, not fully formed, but present. "May I ask another thing?" she said. "You can ask anything. If I permit your continued observation." Her markings warmed at the word. "What do you require in return?" "Requires? Humans rarely give attention without expectation." He considered that. "I don't want anything from you that you don't want to give," he said finally. "If all that comes of this is you feeling a little less alone on this very loud, very ugly station, I'll take it." Her markings flared bright, molten gold at that. "You are an impractical creature," she murmured. "Occupational hazard." She studied him in silence for several long seconds. Then, very deliberately, she did something he hadn't seen her do with anyone else on the station. She reached across the small distance between them and placed her hand, palm up, on the crate between them. A neutral offering, fingers relaxed, not quite touching his. "For the sake of clarity," she said softly, "I do not wish for this to be only less loneliness." His breath caught. "Liraen, I am not yet ready for contact," she continued, voice barely above the hum of the cargo bay. "But I am ready to remain, here, in your presence, to let you look, to let myself be seen." He looked at her hand, at the space between their fingers, at the light in her markings that pulsed in time with her pulse. The next shift cycle unfolded with a strange new gravity between them, quiet, warm, impossible to ignore. And everyone noticed, not because Elias and Liraen were doing anything obvious. They weren't touching. They weren't lingering in corners. They weren't whispering to each other like teenagers on a colony shuttle. But their presence had changed. When Liraen entered a room now, Elias' spine straightened before his brain even registered why. And whenever he walked into a shared space, her markings brightened, barely, subtly, but visible to anyone who'd been paying attention, which unfortunately included the engineering team. "Cargo boy," Chief Herrera said that morning, arms crossed, eyebrows raised. "Why does the Aelrian specialist look at you like you're a favorite book?" "I don't know what that means," Elias lied instantly. "Uh-huh." Herrera's stare was the kind used for interrogating people who said the fusion core was probably fine. "Just whatever you're doing, Don't let it mess with station protocols. I'm not doing anything, Elias protested. You absolutely are, Herrera said and walked away before he could argue. He'd never wanted to evaporate more. But humiliation had to wait. The Star Whisper was preparing for an FTL calibration check, and Liraen had called for assistance from cargo and engineering teams, which meant Elias would be spending the next several hours in Navigation Deck 4 with her. He tried not to think about that as he climbed the ladder well. Tried, failed, badly. The navigation chamber was dim when he entered, lit only by holographic constellations drifting in slow, deliberate spirals. Liraen stood at the central console, markings shifting through soft emerald tones, the Aelrian color for intense focus. She didn't turn when he stepped inside, but her markings warmed the moment he crossed the threshold. That color, Elias said before he could stop himself, means you're pleased. She froze. Very slowly she turned toward him. Her eyes widened in a way that looked half impressed, half alarmed. You learned that quickly. Studying, he said, trying to keep up. Her markings flickered, quick gold, then a subtle rosy blush. That is unexpectedly endearing. He cleared his throat before the warmth in his chest became too visible. What did you need help with? She gestured to the floating starfield. We are approaching a corridor of turbulent gravimetric drift. The station must adjust its internal mass distribution for stability. Your cargo layout affects that. So you need updated numbers. I need you, she corrected. Your specific understanding of this bay's mass drift behavior. Chief Herrera lacks your familiarity with the structural inconsistencies. Elias blinked. You asked for me by name. Yes, her tone was matter of fact. Her markings were absolutely not. He tried to focus. Really, he did. But her being so openly straightforward had a gravitational effect he hadn't prepared for. Right, he said, stepping beside her. Let's do this. They worked in near silence for several minutes. Liraen adjusting gravitational models, Elias cross-checking mass calculations, both moving in seamless parallel. It felt natural, too natural. You are calmer today, she observed quietly without looking up. So are you. My markings disagree. He glanced at her forearm. They glowed soft amber, the Aelrian equivalent of anticipation. Amber means, do not say it aloud, she said immediately. He grinned. Why not? Because you will be correct, and that will make the color intensify, and I am attempting to maintain professional composure. Right, my bad. Your continued amusement does not assist. Her markings flared brighter. He bit his lip to keep from laughing. Then everything changed in an instant. A tremor rolled through the Star Whisper's hull, metal groaning, lights flickering. Elias grabbed the console to steady himself. Liraen reacted faster, fingers dancing across holographic controls with impossible precision. Unexpected gravity shear, she said sharply. A large mass entered the drift corridor without transmitting identification. Elias felt the shift before he saw it, a low, heavy pull that bent the air, dragging the room slightly off balance. Is it a ship? He asked. No. Her markings cooled to stormy indigo. It is organic. Elias' chest tightened, like alive. Alive, she confirmed, and large. The hull shuddered again, harder this time. Tools clattered. Liraen braced herself, recalibrating the ship's stabilizers with hands that moved like light. Another jolt. Elias stumbled, and Liraen, without hesitation, grabbed his wrist to keep him upright. The contact lasted less than a breath. But it was a detonation. Her markings exploded in golden-white light, so bright they illuminated the entire chamber. She jerked her hand back instantly, breath catching in her throat. That was. She swallowed hard. Not ideal for emotional neutrality. You saved me from face-planting into a gravimetric console, he said. Pretty sure neutrality wasn't an option. Her markings flared again. This time she didn't look away. You affect them, she whispered. My markings. You affect them more than variables, more than stimulus, more than training. You are a catalyst. Elias' pulse stumbled. Is that good? It is unprecedented. That's not an answer. It is the only answer I have. Another tremor shook the station, strong enough to snap her attention back to the console. The organism is moving away, she said, scanning rapidly. The drift corridor is stabilizing. Any damage? Minor. Nothing harmful. The ship steadied. The lights returned to normal. Liraen exhaled, long and slow, her markings settling into soft, drowsy twilight hues, and only then did she look at him again. You are still within my personal radius, she said quietly. I can step back, he offered. You could, she agreed, but she didn't move, neither did he. The space between them hummed with potential, quiet, steady, inevitable. You said I was a catalyst, he murmured. Yes. For what? She hesitated. Her hand lifted, almost unconsciously, hovering inches from his wrist, as if remembering the moment she'd grabbed him to keep him from falling. My people believe that certain individuals, she began slowly, rarely, unpredictably, can sync with another's markings, not by training, not by ritual, by resonance. Resonance, the word settled like a warm weight in his chest. And what does that mean? He asked. That I cannot remain emotionally neutral in your presence, she whispered. That my markings respond as though you are significant. How significant? Her markings glowed like dawn breaking through clouds. The emergency passed, but the aftermath lingered like static in the air. For the rest of the cycle, Liraen moved through the Star Whisper with disciplined grace, but beneath her skin, her markings betrayed a storm, not frantic or panicked. Warmer. Brighter, as if every time her mind drifted toward what happened in Navigation Deck 4, her body answered before she could suppress it. It made focusing on cargo operations extremely difficult for Elias, especially when the crew started talking. Did you see her in the mess hall? One tech whispered as Elias walked in. She was glowing gold, gold. That's their emotional color, right? Like, intense emotional color. No idea. But she sits next to Cade now, every time. Elias pretended not to hear. Liraen was already in the corner of the mess, posture straight, markings shimmering like the last light before dusk. She lifted her eyes when he entered, softening just slightly. It was the kind of subtle reaction only someone who'd been watching her too closely for too long could have caught. He sat across from her. You are avoiding eye contact, she said immediately. He looked up fast. No, I'm not. You are, she said calmly, and your heart rate is elevated. You can't hear my weight. Can you hear my heart rate? Not here, she said. Observe. She tapped her temple. Aelrian peripheral vision tracks micro-movement patterns, pulse points, breath changes. So you can tell when I'm nervous. Your nerves, she added, interfere with your ability to form complete sentences. Right now your language structure is. He held up a hand. Okay, fine, I'm nervous. Her markings brightened instantly. Oh, stars, he muttered. That made it worse. Elias, she said, voice low and steady. You must stop assuming every emotional response of mine is dangerous. It feels dangerous. It feels new, she corrected. New is not synonymous with risk. That calmed him not entirely, but enough to breathe normally. She lowered her voice. We must speak, but not here. Where then? Observation Chamber 2, 26 minutes. And just like that, she rose, graceful, controlled, glowing, and left the mess hall. Half the crew watched her go. The other half watched him. Observation Chamber 2 was one of the quietest places on the station. A small, curved glass room overlooking the starfield, dark except for the faint blue of drifting nebulae. Liraen was already there, standing near the glass, markings reflecting starlight. Is everything okay? He asked as he entered. Yes, she said, but clarity is required. About us. Her markings pulsed warm sunrise gold. Yes. Elias stepped closer, not touching her, not crowding her, just standing within her chosen radius, the one she'd marked as allowed. She exhaled softly. When I left Aelrian space, she began, gaze fixed on the stars, I believed it would take years to unlearn the discipline of emotional restraint. I did not expect anything to disrupt it so quickly. His heartbeat stuttered. You think I'm disrupting you? I know you are. She turned toward him slowly, as if bracing for impact. When you touched me, she said quietly, even accidentally, every safeguard I have spent a lifetime maintaining dissolved. I could not control my markings. I could not control my breathing. That is not a small thing. He swallowed. And is that bad? No, she said immediately, her markings flared bright at the word. No, she repeated softer, but it is overwhelming and unknown and... She hesitated. And I want it, she admitted at last. More than I have wanted anything in years. The confession hit him like gravity shifting under his feet. He stepped closer, but only one cautious step. Liraen. I am not ready for direct contact, she said. Not yet. Touch is a powerful bond in my culture. It can escalate things quickly. Okay, but she continued, I want proximity. He blinked. Proximity. Stand, she instructed gently, here. She stepped backward, exactly 1 foot. A deliberate invitation. He moved into the space she'd offered. Their hands weren't touching. Their bodies weren't touching. but the air between them charged instantly with something alive. Liraen inhaled sharply as her markings ignited in molten gold. "This," she whispered, "is already difficult. Do you want me to back up?" "No." Her eyes lifted to his, open, luminous. "I want you to stay exactly where you are." The air felt thin. Elias struggled to speak. "Liraen," he murmured, "I don't want to rush anything. We go at your pace." "My pace," she repeated. "Elias, you are my pace." The words nearly buckled him. She steadied herself with a slow breath. "In Aelrian relational theory," she said softly, "resonance is rare, a pattern alignment between two people, emotional, cognitive, sensory. It is believed to occur only when individuals share compatible wavelengths." "Wavelengths?" he echoed. "Yes." Her markings warmed to a soft, shimmering glow. "My markings do not respond this way to anyone else on this station. They respond this way to you." He didn't know what to say to that, so he stepped just a hair closer, not enough to touch, enough to let her decide. Her breath trembled. "Elias," she whispered, "if you move 1 more centimeter, I will touch you." He froze, not from fear, from wanting. "Is that something," he asked slowly, "you don't want?" She lifted her hand, hovering inches from his chest, not touching, just there, trembling lightly. "I want it," she breathed. "But if I touch you now, I will not stop there. Aelrian sensory bonding is intense, too intense if begun without understanding. So we learn first," he said. "Yes. We communicate. Yes. And when you're ready." "Elias," she said softly, "I am already halfway ready." Her markings flared brighter, this time with no attempt to hide it. Star Whisper Station had never felt quiet to Elias, not truly. There was always a hum, a vibration, a metallic heartbeat beneath the walls. But tonight, as he walked the curved corridor toward the calibration wing, the silence felt heavy. Expectant, he and Liraen had not spoken privately since their moment in the observation chamber. Not because they were avoiding each other, far from it, but because proximity had become its own kind of electricity. One spark away from ignition. He didn't know if that scared him or thrilled him, probably both. He found her waiting outside calibration wing 3, hands clasped behind her back, markings dimmed to thoughtful blues. "You came," she said quietly. "You asked. That is not the only reason." His pulse stumbled. "Okay, true." Her markings brightened, more than she intended if her quick inhale was any indication. "Elias," she said, voice softer now, "there is something I did not tell you earlier. About resonance. About danger." The word froze him in place. She gestured for him to follow her inside. Calibration Wing 3 was empty, lights low, a wide circular chamber used for testing the station's artificial gravity systems. Floating calibration drones drifted near the ceiling like metal lanterns. Liraen touched the console and dim starlight-like projections shimmered across the floor. "This room is sound-dampened," she explained. "No one will overhear us." He nodded. "Okay, what's going on?" She took a breath, slow, deliberate. "Do you know why Aelrians rarely form attachments outside our species?" Elias hesitated. "Cultural formality, social restraints, the markings. Those are symptoms, not the cause." Her markings shifted, deep, shimmering violet. An Aelrian's resonance bond is not emotional only. It is sensory, neurological, biological. She stepped closer, not close enough to touch, but far closer than she normally allowed outside private spaces. "Our markings interpret external stimuli as internal signals. When resonance is triggered, proximity becomes—" She paused, searching for a word. "Amplified." "Amplified how?" he asked, her eyes lifted to his. "If you touch me again, intentionally, my body will respond as if you are initiating a bond." His heartbeat skidded. "A bond like courtship," she whispered. "Like claiming, like the beginning of something irreversible." A moment of stunned silence held between them. "Liraen," Elias said slowly, "you think I'd treat that lightly?" "No," her markings pulsed warm gold. "That is precisely why you must understand the weight of it." He rubbed the back of his neck. "So if I touched your hand right now, that would mean I'm starting something sacred." "Yes, and if you touched me." Her markings flared so suddenly, she startled herself. "That," she said, breath unsteady, "would mean I have accepted." A warmth spread through Elias' chest, slow, steady, dizzying. "So you're telling me," he said quietly, "that we've been standing 1 inch from something sacred without realizing how close we were." "We realized," she whispered. "We simply did not speak it." She stepped closer still, barely half a meter now, enough to feel her breath shift the air between them. Her markings glowed, a quiet sunrise under her skin. "There is more," she said. "There's more." Yes, her voice trembled now. Resonance is not always stable. Sometimes it reacts. Reacts how? Suddenly, a low tremor rolled through the room. Not the station, her. The air shimmered around her form, light bending slightly, as if gravity itself tightened for half a second. Elias' breath caught. "Liraen." "It is harmless," she said quickly. "Usually, it only happens when—" "When what?" he pressed. Her next inhale was shallow. "When I am near someone who aligns with me too strongly." A deep, exquisite silence followed. "Me," Elias said, not a question. "Yes," she whispered. "Liraen, that means—" "It means," she said, markings slipping into molten gold now, "that I cannot get closer to you without consequences I am no longer certain I wish to avoid." The universe narrowed to one point, one choice. One breath, he moved slowly, very slowly, closing a few centimeters of the distance. Her markings brightened instantly. "Elias, you said when you're ready you'll choose the moment," he murmured. "Are you ready?" Her gaze fell to his chest, then rose to his throat, then finally met his eyes. "I am trying," she whispered. "Truly, but everything in me is." He leaned forward, not touching, just near enough that her markings flickered wildly. "Tell me," he said. She exhaled a shuddering breath. "Everything in me is reaching for you." Elias felt the words like heat. "Then reach," he whispered. Her hand lifted, stopped, shook, not from fear, from want. She hovered her fingers just over his, so close he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. A half-inch gap, a universe of tension. Her markings blazed bright gold and rose, swirling in living patterns. "I cannot do this lightly," she whispered. "Good," he breathed. "Neither can I." Her breath hitched, their hands, still not touching, trembled toward each other like magnetized stars. "Elias," she whispered, voice breaking. "If my skin touches yours, even once." He swallowed, then let it mean something. Her eyes softened sharply, deeply. "It already does." The air thickened, gravity tilted, her fingers drifted down. And then, the room jolted with a violent alarm. Red light swept the chamber. A metallic voice boomed overhead. "Unstable field detected in calibration wing 3. All personnel evacuate immediately." Liraen jerked back, markings flaring into harsh, startled crimson. Elias grabbed the console edge. "What's happening?" "A gravimetric surge," she said sharply. "Triggered by—" She froze, a horrible realization washed across her features. "Triggered by resonance." "You mean us?" "Yes," she breathed. "We destabilized the calibration field." Another jolt rattled the chamber. She grabbed his wrist without hesitation, not thinking, just reacting. Her markings erupted in blinding gold, and the station's artificial gravity collapsed. They lifted off the ground. Wait, the alarms finally cut out, leaving a ringing silence that felt almost heavier than the noise itself. Metal groaned overhead. The floor vibrated underfoot. A few calibration drones lay scattered on the ground like startled birds. But Elias didn't notice any of it. Not when Liraen's hands were still on him. Not when her markings glowed so brightly the whole room shimmered. Not when her forehead rested against his for a breath that wasn't quite a touch, but wasn't anything less than one either. She held herself perfectly still, too still, breathing too shallowly, like someone standing at the edge of a precipice waiting for gravity to choose her fate. "Liraen," Elias whispered. Her fingers tightened, reflexive, involuntary. "Not restraint, need. We have to move," she said softly. "The field is stabilizing, but secondary surges are possible. We must exit the chamber before." Another tremor shook the floor. Dust drifted from the ceiling. She winced. Not in fear, in conflict. "Elias, I must release you," she murmured, though her hands didn't budge. "You don't have to let go yet," he said. Her markings flared gold so bright it spilled across his shirt. "That," she breathed, "is precisely why I must." But she didn't step back, couldn't. The room buzzed faintly with residual energy, reactive, restless, still attuned to them. Liraen slowly peeled one hand away, but when she tried to lower the other, it trembled violently. "Liraen," Elias said softly, "look at me." She did slowly, like turning towards sunlight. Her eyes were brighter than her markings. "This is overwhelming," she whispered. "My body is behaving as if a bond has already been initiated. That is impossible. Bonds require contact, full contact, sustained, intentional, reciprocal. We didn't touch. Not properly." Her breath shook. "But my markings." She looked down at her arms helplessly. "They are responding as if we did." Elias swallowed hard. "Is that dangerous?" "Not dangerous." She hesitated, but irreversible. His chest tightened. Irreversible how? She stepped back not far, just enough for her markings to dim a fraction. Before we leave here, she said softly, you must understand what resonance means to an alien. He nodded, her voice lowered. There are 3 stages to resonance. Her markings shifted, deep violet threaded with gold. Recognition, alignment, binding. She lifted her gaze to his. We have already passed the first 2. Elias blinked. When? The first time you said I was beautiful. He felt his pulse stumble. And the second, he asked. When you stepped into my proximity circle in the observation chamber, she said, and I did not ask you to leave. Their eyes locked. The memory hit both of them at the same time. Not the words, the stillness, the way the air had changed when he stayed within reach, the way her markings had betrayed her, the way she'd trembled not from fear, but from permission. Elias exhaled slowly. So what happens in the last stage? Her markings pulsed, warm, deep, alive. Binding, she whispered. What does that mean? It is not a marriage, not a contract, not a claim. She swallowed. It is a promise, a sharing, a tethering of emotional wavelengths. 2 people who resonate begin to experience the world through each other. He stared. You mean like empathy? More, she said. A bond accelerates the markings' reactions, makes emotion transparent between partners, makes closeness easier and distance harder. She hesitated, uncertain, hopeful, terrified. And if 2 people are physically connected during the onset of binding? Her markings surged in molten gold. It solidifies instantly. Elias breathed. That's why you pulled back. Yes, her voice cracked barely, because I could not trust myself to stop once I touched you. Their silence vibrated like a pulse between them. Liraen, he said gently, do you regret what happened here? Her markings answered before she did, flaring bright enough to paint the air. No. The word left her in a shaky exhale. Do you want distance? He asked carefully. No, she whispered, this time with certainty. He stepped forward very slowly, very carefully, her breath hitched. Elias. I don't want to push you, he said, but I'm not afraid of what this means. You should be. Her voice was quiet but honest. A bond cannot be undone. Once begun, it shapes both lives, it changes future choices. He searched her eyes. Does it frighten you? Yes, she admitted, but not because of what it changes. Then why? Because, she breathed, I want it so much that restraint feels dishonest. She rarely confessed things plainly. This one nearly dropped him to his knees. Liraen, he whispered, tell me what you want. She closed the distance by a single breath, not touching, just near enough that her markings flared in a halo of gold. I want, she whispered, to choose you. The chamber hummed, his pulse hammered, her markings shimmered everywhere. But I need time, she said desperately. Not because I doubt you, but because I have never allowed myself this desire. He lifted one hand, slow, deliberate, and set it against his own chest instead of hers. Her eyes widened. He wasn't reaching for her, he was showing. I'm here, he said softly. There's no rush. Her markings glowed, steady, brilliant, grateful. She exhaled. Thank you. Then, to his shock, she reached out not to touch him, but to hover her hand over his heart, close enough to feel the heat, close enough to let her markings react freely. And they did. They blazed warm, golden, open. This, she whispered, is the pace I choose. He lifted his hand and mirrored her, hovering over her heart, not touching, just feeling the thrum of heat through the air. Her eyes fluttered, closed. The moment stretched. A breath, a promise, a bond beginning not with skin, but with choice. She opened her eyes again, glowing softly. When I touch you, she said quietly, I want it to be intentional, mutual, and without restraint. Elias felt his breath leave him. Then when that moment comes, it will, she said, her markings blooming like dawn. And when it does, nothing in the universe will pull us apart. The chamber lights flickered back to life. Sensors rebooted. Calibration drones rose from the floor. Reality returned. But something much deeper had been set in motion. They walked out together, not touching. Not yet. But their hands